Tem Gearbaugh, Council Members Delorco, Kraus, and Dillon. From city staff, we have City Manager O'Toole, Clerk Royal, Assistant City Manager Getzman, Treasurer Bennett, and Wastewater Water Treatment Superintendent Briggs. Because I cannot see who's participating via Zoom. Clerk Royal, can you acknowledge for the record who's participating remotely?
Assistant Treasurer Weberling and City Council Member Camaro Sulak.
Very good. At this time, the chair would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as submitted unless there are amendments.
So moved.
As submitted, Councilmember
As
Kraus?
submitted.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Dillon. All those in favor of the in favor of approving the agenda as submitted signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. How about now a motion to excuse the absences of our council colleagues Seo and Kamara Sulak?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Delorco. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. At this time, we come to citizen comments under the Open Meetings Act. Any citizen may come forward at this time, make comment or question on an item that appears on this agenda. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. I'm assuming there's no comments from those in the audience this evening. This would be Council Member Kamara Sulak's opportunity to comment if he wished to.
I have no comment.
Okay, easy enough. And then Clerk Royal, were there any, I know there was at least one comment received in advance of tonight's meeting in which the individual wanted his statement read. And if there are more, please.
I just have the one. Mr. Alval?
Pull the microphone a little bit closer to you, Terry.
Okay. It says, ladies and gentlemen, I read the synopsis of recent council deliberations regarding proposed changes to city water and sewer service rates in the Saline Post dated April 6, 2022. I also reviewed the Baker-Tilly rate study included in the April 4th City Council work meeting agenda. The magnitude of the increase now being discussed are concerning, to say the least. I found Baker-Tilly's assumption that no significant population growth is anticipated surprising, unless there is a formal plan to reduce rates as the customer base grows. I am familiar with the January 2020 wastewater treatment plant siting study that Tetra Tech prepared and the subsequent independent review of that document performed by OHM on the city's behalf. In light of the potential impact upon the system's current ratepayers, I agree with Councilor Del Orco's quote in the Saline Post. Hearing what the costs are today and what they are escalating to, I am beginning to wonder if regionalization isn't the more practical approach. OHM's review of the siting study suggests there is a strong potential for capital costs associated with connecting the YCUA system to be significantly reduced by alternate construction techniques that would minimize the cost of surface restoration. Other potential advantages of this regional approach were also described. A principal advantage of the currently selected alternative, expanding the existing wastewater treatment plant, is the ability to stage the improvements to somewhat parallel the project customer expansion as much as practical to reduce the need for existing users to subsidize increases in both the capital and operating costs. Please reconsider the sequence and timing of proposed improvements in an effort to postpone as much of the incurred cost as possible until additional users are online and contributing to debt service and O&M cost recovery. The rate increases currently under discussion appear predicated upon all improvements taking place within the next few years. Well, before the hope for dramatic increase in customers can reasonably occur, unless a substantial fraction of the new users is on board in the next very quickly. The brunt of the financial burden will, by necessity, be borne by current ratepayers. If the time frame for expansion cannot be extended as described, I suggest a further in-depth assessment of abandoning the existing wastewater treatment plant and connecting to the Yucca system should be undertaken, including revisit potential for a cost-sharing arrangement with Pittsfield Township should they be considered increasing the capacity of their wastewater connection at Yucca. Seek a formal proposal from Yucca confirming all of the associated costs over the range of future flows. Perform a detailed conceptual design. Do you want me to continue
No, that's good, because everyone on council would have received the email. We appreciate the insights from Mr. Albaugh. Thank you, Tom. Were there any additional comments submitted in writing, Clerk Royal? No. Very good. Then we'll transition to the one and only discussion item of the evening, which is follow-up discussion on our recent utility rate study. City Manager O'Toole, would you like to begin?
So per our budget workshop on April 11th, we still had some outstanding questions regarding the sewer budget, specifically the scope of the Phase 1 wastewater treatment plant project and the ultimate FY23 rate increases that would need to be realized to begin preparing for that. Included in your packet is a memo from me that summarizes the recommendation now from the Water Wastewater Ad Hoc Committee regarding the scope of services. One thing that I'd like to note is, and I believe council is aware of this, but for public certification, the scope of these services is designed to serve our existing demands on the system. The future phases are really what is geared towards the future growth and expansion of the facility. These items are largely ones identified to address concerns raised in the administrative consent order that we have with Eagle, and to address certain criticality of function within the treatment plant processing itself. So at this time, I guess I would turn it over for questions that may still be outstanding regarding either the project scope, the budget, or what now you have the two options, options 1 and 3 from Baker Tilly of the rate increases, where option 1 was the original Phase 1 design with the biosolids plan implemented but no aeration, and option 3 is no biosolids but with aeration. Again, option 3 is what is the recommendation now of staff and the Water Wastewater Ad Hoc Committee, and what we would be looking at for fiscal year 23 is a quarterly rate impact of $18 on average to the billable flow and $4.25 to the commodity charge per quarter.
So state that one more time, because that's obviously going to be of interest to our constituents. and
Certainly.
business owners. Yep.
So what we're looking at in aggregate, the average quarterly impact under option 3 would be $22.25. That's $18 on average to the ready-to-serve side, and $4.25 estimated on the commodities charges, which is that per 1,000 gallons used.
So it's a $22.25 increase per quarter, just on the sewer side.
Correct.
It doesn't include, I believe it was a $14 increase for water. Does that sound about right?
I apologize, I don't have that queued up right now.
That's all right. If you could look it up while we do our round of questions, because we'll want to be able to confirm that. Do you have anything else at this time, City Manager O'Toole?
Nope.
Okay, let's start just with questions, and then we can dive into discussions and comments. So I'll start to my left with Councilmember Delorco and end with Councilmember Kraus. So questions for City Manager or City Staff, Mr. Delorco?
Certainly. The first question I have is related to the recommendation to now move forward with replacing RBCs as part of Phase 1. I think as recently as last week, during the budget discussions, we talked about this, and it was the plan or the recommendation at that time of the ad hoc committee that we would defer that to Phase 2 with the understanding that improvements to the Headworks building and automated bar screens would remove BODs from the processing, and that would be sufficient to accomplish what we needed with Phase 1, and now it seems we have a different recommendation.
So the Headworks is still in this project. For reference, the biosolids plan is that screw press. So it's the dewatering process that would change what it means for us to have to land apply as frequently. With the biosolids plan implemented, we can choose between dewatering and landfilling the waste or land applying. The reason that we have an interest in that project is because we do anticipate new regulations coming down from the state regarding land application. Because those regulations haven't come to fruition yet, we feel there's some degree of safety, as safe as you ever get when it comes to state regulations, regarding the timeline for implementation of that. But that does not change the Headworks. That's a separate project.
No, I understand all that, but somehow that recommendation changed from last week to today, and I want to know what changed.
In terms of the aeration, I think aeration was always a part of the concern for the Water Wastewater Ad Hoc Committee. Really, relatively, those two projects, biosolids and aeration, are fairly similar in terms of overall cost, but with the recent issues with the RBCs, we're starting to see where aeration may become a compliance benefit faster than biosolids may. Bill, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, because Bill was also an advocate of adding aeration.
Thank you, Bill. Make sure that microphone is on. The green light should be illuminated, please.
Appears to be, yes. So I think aeration is important. The RBCs, again, they're good for what they do. The problem is right now we have one BOD RBC down, and there are 4 of those.
Right.
Okay. So right now we're meeting our limits for April. When it turns to May, if we don't have that fixed by then we'll be exceeding our permit for what we do with BODs. And the BODs are a lot easier to deal with in an aeration system than they are in the BODs, or the RBC system, the way it sets right now. And between the condition of the media on the RBCs, like I said, we had it inspected fall last year, and I said, well, I'm hoping in a couple of years to not have to use these. Well, they might last that long, the media. And so we're spending, I can't remember the exact number, Colleen, to you for repairing the RBC?
For the shaft repair, it's about 50,000.
1,000. So if the media itself, now you're talking a couple $100,000 to change the media in them. So I think it's prudent that we move forward with the aeration and kind of eliminate the RBCs in this whole process, because, it's going to take, the first phase, you're looking at 2 to 3 years to get everything up and running to begin with.
Right.
So in that amount of time, if one of the RBC media decides to unwind on us, and it'll be a whole new ball of wax for what we're going to have to deal with.
Okay,
So-
thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah, the concern was because a number of us had concerns about the RBCs moving into these discussions, and they were shifted over to they were in phase 2, and we were actually advocating for them to come to phase 1, and I'm
Right.
just wondering what the momentum shift was about. So the next question that I have is, if we're swapping our biosolids dewatering plan to phase 2 for replacing the RBCs, what accounts for the difference of numbers that we received last week in the amount of 56.4 million now to 62 million?
That's the difference between removing the biosolids, so the dewatering process, and adding in aeration.
Okay, so, all right, so this is a more expensive option, but
Yes.
a recommended one nonetheless.
Correct.
Thank you. That's all I have for now.
Thank you, Mr. Delarco. Mr. Gerba, I am seeking just questions at the moment, but as the council liaison to the water treatment ad hoc committee, if there's anything you want to say in that capacity first, the chair would welcome that, and then you can dive into questions if you have any for staff.
One of the things that we just recently learned is that, and as you saw on Friday when Manager O'Toole sent out, was another letter of potential violation from the state of Michigan. And so looking at, it's like a either or. We have an issue where potentially could be violating with the BODs in the system, or we may not have enough storage to meet 180 days of storage capacity. So we're chancing it one way or the other with sludge storage and handling versus aeration and the BOD, I believe. And so now we've got, and you want to clarify?
Well, yeah, there's had an email between myself and Brian Rubel from Tetra Tech, and his team and I didn't pass this along, it's my fault, I'm sorry. But he says that by their calculations, we should have 200 days of storage in a normal season for biosolids. So the 180 days, I was a little confused myself about the 180-day comment that they had in there. Like, I wasn't sure exactly what they meant. So, but we are going to have a meeting with them next week, maybe?
Yeah, we're trying for Thursday of this week, but
Oh, for this
at the
week?
latest,
Okay.
Monday of next week.
To try and clarify some of the things.
Tetra Tech and representatives from Eagle to clarify some of their comments in that letter.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was just a number of issues that come up, but in that situation, it's like, we figured the BOD thing is going to be more of a concern before the state mandates a change in how we handle our sludge, because that issue would be impacting everybody, and so that would be probably 4, 5, 6 years down the road. But as you look at the change and everything, and as you talk about what we potentially could face if something fails, the switch was good for the aeration, but it is gonna cost us
A little bit more money.
$4 million.
Yeah.
And so as we talk about rate structures and everything, we need to be able to commit to that. So that was kind of the part that we wanted to make sure, and the recommendations now to make sure that we don't have that problem. As long as the process at the head works and everything is gonna be included, that will help also address the BOD concerns, which were part of the problem with our existing system.
Yes, yes.
Anything else, Mayor Pro Tem Gearbo?
No.
Joe? Okay.
I did find the information, the water rates here, correct. It's about $14 a quarter.
So we're looking at an average increase of $36.25 per quarter.
No, so on the water side, it's $4 and a quarter per 1,000 gallons used. So the average resident uses about 13,500, that's what we assume, if you use more or less. So per quarter, we're looking at about $81 between the two. But residents can estimate that based on their own current usage. The increase on the sewer side is $18, and that's the ready to serve, so that's a flat, plus an extra $4.25 per 1,000 gallons used for the sewer side. On the water side, it's a flat $8 increase plus $1 per 1,000 gallons used.
So what's the total? Water and sewer combined with ready-to-serve fees?
So the total ready-to-serve fee increase would be 8 plus the 22, 8 plus 18, so 26, and then an extra $1.25 per 1,000 gallons. And for the average user who uses 13,500 gallons, that's about $81 a quarter.
Water and sewer combined?
Combined, correct.
Thank you, City Manager O'Toole. Councilmember Dillon, questions for the city staff?
Thank you. I definitely had the same question that Mr. Delorco started with, that I feel like we've kind of gone down a different path all of a sudden, because it seemed like we were very adamant that we were not going to deal with the RBCs. I do understand that it's constantly in motion and things are changing, but it's sort of difficult to keep up with. In 1 week, we've made a very big change, which adds another $10 million to a project. So I'm trying to grasp that concept. Most of my questions more stem on the billing side of things, because that's right now where I'm trying to get a better grasp. When I look at our chart for option 3, and thank you very much for clarifying, because all of a sudden I'm like, wait, how come these numbers seem so much lower? It's per 1,000.
Yeah.
And so we need to remember that, that aspect. But when we look at this, so the first column where we're seeing an increase per year, that's for 21-22. So there's only one more quarter left there at that rate, correct? And then we're going to jump to the next increase.
No, it's saying that that's the increase for the upcoming fiscal year. So it's showing 21-22 rates, which is the current fiscal year, and then it's saying the increase for 22-23. So if you look, that the 21-22 rates plus the increase per year is equal to the 22-23 rates.
Okay. Okay, thank you for clarifying that, because I'm trying to figure, because that was what I was going to ask you, is it looks like I was missing a column for 22-23.
Yeah, it's confusing because in 21-22, the increase is shown before 22-23, and for 23-24, it's shown after. So I think that's part of the confusion in reading that chart.
Okay. So then the $81 quarterly charge that we're talking about is going to cover what period of time?
22-23, FY23.
Okay. So that'll be from July 1 of this year to June. So then the following year, we're going to look at another increase.
Correct.
So, okay. That helps me a little bit.
And that FY24 increase will be directly related to, at that point, the actual project costs that we know at the time. Because by that point, we'll have Baker Tilly back in to look at the final project scope, real costs, hopefully, at that point, actually have some bid results to consider and base rates on actuals instead of projected.
Okay. And then I just want to hit upon, because I feel like we're just sort of blushing over this extra $10 million all of a sudden. That's kind of come up to the front of what are we doing with that? And how does that play into these numbers? It's calculated into this now, but it just seems almost nominal how 10 million can, because.
So it's
would we have been at-
5.6 million is the increase. We went from 56.4 to 62.
Okay,
It's phasing
Yes.
over 3-year periods. It's just shifting things.
Yeah, and the reason that it looks so nominal is because over the scope of 5 years, we're still doing the entire project.
right.
We're just changing when in the project we do certain things. So the total amount of money that we need to serve this project over the next 5 years is relatively the same. The timing really only impacts inflation or that,
Most of
factors
it is
in.
front-loaded to the first 3 years, essentially.
Well, the bigger the project is up front, the more we have to front load it.
Right, yeah.
So, okay, I'll stop there, let Ms. Kraus have a turn, and then hopefully we'll circle back to a little bit more detail.
Very good. Councilmember Kraus, questions for the city manager or for city staff?
Just like Mr. Delorco and Ms. Dillon, that shift is what I was questioning, but I think we're good on that.
Nothing else then?
No, thank you.
City manager O'Toole, anything else you'd like to add?
Really, at this point, at our first meeting in May, we'll be asking council to set the rates for FY23. So this is the opportunity, if you have any existing concerns about what is being presented now, to have that conversation and to give us the opportunity to see what we can do. At this point, this is a recommendation from staff, from our financial consultants, and from our engineering consultants.
Very good. And will you, between now and the next couple of days, will you send an obligatory email to council members, CO and Kamara Sulak, just to follow up on tonight's meeting and address any concerns that they may have and confirm that we are looking for a vote and consensus when we reconvene? I believe that's on, is that May the 3rd? Second, excuse me. All right, let me jump back to Councilmember Delorco. Questions, or of course you can make comments at this time, Jim.
Thank you, Mayor. Just in terms of looking at the options presented to us by management and Baker Tilly, there were some significant arguments made against the tiered structure that the resident raised in the email, based on the idea that we would be disproportionately charging large businesses for their use and demand on the system as opposed to residents, and that would open us up to potential litigation. And that was the biggest argument against it. And I want to just go over some numbers and highlight the fact that in some aspects, we're already doing this, disproportionately charging, just in the other direction. So if we take our low-demand users, namely senior citizens, around 8,000 gallons as opposed to 13.5, which is the average. That's a $165 water bill. And $65 of that water bill comes from readiness to serve charges and billing. And that represents a 40% portion of their bill. This, of course, would be lowered to a 20% portion of the bill if we use the numbers of 13,500 gallons. And the entire fee structure is based on increasing the readiness to serve charges as opposed to looking at increasing volumetric changes or charging by the amount of water actually used. The issue I have with basing this on readiness to serve charges is when you look at this in terms of high volume users with larger water meters that set their readiness to serve fees, they're paying a fraction of 1% as compared to the 40 to 28% you would see for a residential users portion of their bill. What I'm looking for is an option that seeks to minimize the impact that rate hikes would have on low to moderate income households and for our fixed income seniors. So hopefully we can look at how to base rates on the volume of water and sewer actually used. And if we could get figures from either yourself or Baker Tilly that looks at raising the volumetric charge or the water and sewer as opposed to adjusting the readiness to serve charges, I think that would be helpful to put some of this into perspective.
Sure. I would note, too, something that residents will see as a change on their bill this coming year, or at least what's being recommended in this rate study is, while sewer is showing a $3 or an $18 increase in ready-to-serve per quarter, we are eliminating a $7.93 billing charge. So the net impact is closer to $10. If you notice in the Baker Tilly option, that charge per bill is no longer carrying forward.
I do see that.
Yeah,
yes.
so it's not quite as impactful as it looks, but certainly I can ask Baker Tilly to take another look at if there's a better way to assign this to volume versus ready to serve. Obviously, there is a balance there because you
understand.
can't fund it all exclusively on the demand, because there are system assets that exist regardless of the level of demand on the system, regardless, and that's really why the ready-to-serve fee is designed the way that it is.
Right, but we're only being presented with one option and one way forward, and I would like to be able to look at some different
Sure.
options, different figures. And then twofold, another advantage to this approach would be one of the greatest demands on the system and the greatest difficulty for the municipality is serving the needs of our customers on the driest, hottest days of the year. Summer is a very difficult time for us, and a lot of that's due to the irrigation of lawns and people using their sprinkler systems, to the extent that this has come through in the Code Review Committee. And one way to discourage people really irrigating their lawns is to, if you're being charged by the volume of water you use, that's going to inherently discourage people from overdoing that.
Yeah, I'd be happy to bring that question back to Baker Tilly and see if they have any recommendations for how we might change that balance.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Delorco. Mayor Pro Tem Gearba, any additional questions or comments?
No, I mean, we reviewed this enough times in terms of the dollar amounts and everything. We need to move forward on this. It's something that we've kicked the can down so far that it just continues to grow and grow. As for the rates, my concern is to make sure we have a defendable position in how we do the rates. These things are challenged all the time. And like I said before, Ann Arbor's being sued based on what they currently have done and what they put aside. It's the problem of the system and the way that the courts have defined it that we cannot seem to be able to properly acquire funds to fund these type of situations without having to do it basically as a point in time when you're actually doing the project instead of being able to set aside a large sinking fund that can take care of it. So at this point, some of the changes that were made were to actually meet recommendations that were suggested or asked by this council. And the other part of it was is that if you wanted to try and keep or defer some of the rate increases, it does mean cutting out parts of what we're doing and then putting it out later and later, and those end up getting more and more expensive, and then you're having to raise the fees more and more. I do take note that the individual said that we haven't taken into consideration, the potential growth or whatever else. We do know that's coming. It's just that if we have a recession or something does happen in the next year or two and the projects don't happen, we can't count on that revenue as being a guarantee unless it's within a specific time frame, and that's exactly what this proposal is trying to do. I don't know what else we can do in terms of being able to adjust for lower income. I think one of the suggestions was to figure out ways to address a plan on how you would appeal or request, similar to what we do with taxes and other things, that there might be a fund or some other approach of that, but that would be paid out of general funds, not necessarily out of the user rate, because trying to share that cost across everybody, it's that type of thing again of, are you subsidizing some for others? This is the same problem that's facing Great Lakes Water Authority, because they're worried about trying to pay for the bills that it's either Hamtramck or Highland Park have never paid for it. So there's a lot of different ways to look at this. I just think that we're moving forward, and I believe we paid money to the consultants that we have hired, and we just need to get this going so that we can show that to our bond issuers and to the state that we have a plan in place, we're going to generate the revenue to cover it, and that we aren't going to have a jeopardy in case that we don't get the state money, that we do have the sufficient information and support to convince our bond issuers that we are at good risk and can move this forward as soon as possible. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Dillon.
Thank you. I do have to say, I concur with Mr. Gearbaugh on some of what he just said, that, you know, at this point, we've been trying to be diligent in staying relatively flat over the years with rate increases, and at some point, you've got to play catch-up, and we've hit that day and time. And so we are going to have to do something, and it is going to be a tiered increase over many years that we're going to have to get used to in order to do it. I do want to ask about what is the status with our triple rate customers? Are they going to fall into this also? Because if you kind of do rough numbers, you're looking at, for those individuals, about $1,000 a year?
Yeah, we are proposing with this current rate structure, eliminating the triple rate structure. There are just not a sufficient number of individuals on that to warrant the continued administration of it or the legal costs that often arise because of it. And we certainly would have a challenge justifying 3 times this rate for those users because we do have to tie it directly to the system itself, the system's needs. Our rate study concluded that we wouldn't be able to do that in this case.
Okay, if that were the case, I would struggle to agree to that unless we definitely solicited the Boundary Commission to bring those parcels into the city. They are getting all of the benefits of being within the city and not having to pay the taxes, the millages, and such. And that was sort of the balance piece to it. So I would like to make sure that the city is left whole as far as that's concerned, because that is a big, a big issue for me. I understand that there are not that many of them, but at the same time, they are within the city. Those islands have now really been embraced and encompassed the city. And so I do think that at this point, we need to look at that. And then as far as, kind of looking through all of these charts, what we looked at last week from the Baker Tilly and then today. So when I look at option 1 versus option 3, it's a really nominal difference up front. And so I'm just trying to figure out what's making those different.
Well, I mean, the difference is just when we have our first debt payments due and the size of that first debt payment. So if you look at the bottom of the sheet, the last, 2, 3, 4 lines up, it shows the different bond issuances and the debt payments that would be associated with them in any given year up until we reach FY 27, which is when we would expect to have this project fully realized, or at least the debt for this project fully realized.
Okay. And then on our chart, there's a couple of things. There's a bunch of different colors, but I don't see a key to those. Are those things that we should be looking at in any specific order, or is there something? I feel like if somebody spent the time to highlight them, then maybe we should be drawing attention to them.
Yeah, I apologize, I don't have a key for those colors either. It certainly asked the question. I think it's just intending to call out kind of the primary information from each of those columns.
Okay.
Well, certainly with the debt issuances, you can see it's just highlighting the years where it's ramping up to the payments. And with the ready to serve and the commodity charges, it's highlighting those in the quarterly totals.
Okay, because I'm just not sure of how these numbers run, because if you were to look, I'm looking on option 3 chart towards the bottom where it's net operating revenue. And then we go from 1.3 to 2.3 to 3.9. And I'm just sort of trying to kind of make sense of these numbers.
Yeah, and that really is playing into the ramping up of rates so that we can get to a point where we're able to fund our full debt issuance with, which if you look in the subsequent fiscal year, from the 24, 25, and what will be 27 debt service, we're estimating, let's see, about 4.4 million, I'm just doing the math real quick, 4.3 million in debt service a year.
Okay. Okay. Okay, I'll stop there. Like I said, I'm just still a little bit confused by some of the way the numbers are, but that just may need some.
Yeah, and I'd be happy, I'm sure Baker Utility would be happy to host, if anyone would like, another conversation or any individual questions, I can certainly forward on to them.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Councilmember Kraus?
Thank you, Mayor. So I agree with Mr. Gearbaugh and Ms. Dillon about moving forward. It seems like this has been sitting around a while. I'd love to see the tiered system, but the risk mitigation, like that makes me nervous with the lawsuits, and we're trying to, so at this time, I'm inclined to go with option 3, unfortunately.
Thank you, appreciate those remarks. City Manager O'Toole, I do have a couple questions. Has any type of initial analysis been done to determine what impact primarily on utility users our $18 million federal grant would have if we were to receive it?
Well, what I would say is we could probably point to one of the original budgets that we looked at, the original rate analysis that we looked at. It won't exactly be the 18 million, but for example, so, yeah, a great example would be when we were originally estimating this project to be about 45 million, those rates would be applicable if we could get that 18 million in federal support.
And then to jump back to a topic that my colleague, Councilmember Dillon, addressed, the non-resident rate, which is currently a triple rate. As a matter of principle, or on principle, I agree with her that just charging the basic rate for water and sewer services for somebody who doesn't live within the corporate limits of Saline and thereby doesn't pay even a fraction of what you and I pay in property taxes a year seems fundamentally unfair to me. Has there been any analysis or thought instead of maybe, as opposed to a triple rate, maybe a double rate?
So I want to defer to our legal counsel on this. I believe they've drafted an opinion that was shared previously, but perhaps it would make sense to have that opinion discussed in another session. At this point, I'll just reiterate, any charges, regardless of the jurisdiction of the end user, have to be justified. So we have to have a study that shows that those individuals have a cost that is greater, not related to things that aren't utility-based, that are solely related to the operation of the utility for those users. Otherwise, we expose ourselves to liability. And given the very small number of users like this that we have, doing that level of analysis, pursuing that kind of legal justification doesn't seem financially worth it.
I can probably go along with that, but I think having something in written form
Sure.
from legal counsel would be valuable, not only to me personally, but to this group as a whole. My only other comments, to just jump back to the $18 million federal grant request that we put in. Obviously, that's a key priority for me personally and for this body more broadly. That's why I made such an emphatic push to have our various community stakeholders and every member of council write a letter to our current member of Congress, our new member of Congress, Debbie Dingell, and our 2 United States Senators, Gary Peter and Debbie Stabenow. And for full disclosure, we do have a meeting scheduled this Friday with Congresswoman Dingell and her staff, so we should have, I think, a better idea subsequent to that, the likelihood of Saline receiving either 18 million or a portion of that. I do want to also return to a point that I think Councilmember Dillon first raised and then I reiterated 2 weeks ago, which is, and I may be an outlier on this, and that's fine. It's it's not the first time, I'm sure it won't be the last. But in light of rising cost, in light of supply chain issues, in light of inflation that's at a 30-year high, and in light of the fact that this body and this city have invested significant time and resources and made public and private commitments to rehab and modernize our wastewater treatment plant, I think it does make sense to try and re-engage Eagle and potentially involve our elected officials to see if we can get some additional time to complete the necessary upgrades that we have committed to do. I should preface, I did not do a deep dive into the most recent paperwork that you provided. I do appreciate that. I appreciate the work that you and the wastewater treatment and water treatment ad hoc committee have done, along with Baker Tilly and staff. I am a little foggy today, but it's going to be really hard for me to vote in favor of an increase of $80+ per utility customer per quarter. So I just want to put that out there. I will do a deeper dive on this, hopefully if I return to the office tomorrow or Wednesday, and have some follow-up questions for you. But I do think re-engaging Eagle, I think that's one. I think two, if there's any way to eliminate anything that is not completely essential, is key. And in light of rising costs, I think that, and I should have noted this earlier, Mr. Albaugh, who worked with OHM, who did a review of the Tetra Tech analysis, actually used to be a consultant for us previously before he retired from Tetra Tech. So what he's speaking to is actually his vocation of, I think, 30+ years. So I'm also not adverse to at least doing a basic overture to Yucca to see where we would be if the city decided to pursue a more regional approach. Again, it might be too late for that, but just trying to spitball here and come up with anything I can to control these costs and make this project a bit more manageable.
So one thing I would note in terms of regionalism is, one, we've already entered into an administrative consent order where we've identified certain corrective actions. Those actions do need to occur to meet the intent of that agreement. Two, the Yucca costs are just as likely to have increased with inflation since our 2020 estimation. If you recall, that project path was substantially more costly than this project path, and obviously it had certain political challenges to it. But in terms of our best way forward, I think we as a community continue to lean on our representatives to try and secure federal funding. As a matter of context, if that $45 million plan were to be implemented, or if those were still the numbers, we would have been looking at a difference of almost $46 a quarter less. So it would have a significant impact on our residents to have that federal support.
And as you and I have discussed, if Saline were to receive the $18 million or some portion of that via a federal appropriation, we still have an additional bite at the apple when additional resources are allocated to the state.
Correct.
That's why it's so critical to pursue this federal grant, because there's opportunity for subsequent funding in later years.
Yes, but again, as Baker Tilly advised us, I would be mindful not to assume that we'll get anything from the state, because under their current guidelines, we don't qualify.
I have a question.
Please, Mr. Dolan.
I just want to highlight that, as Baker Tilly pointed out, there's a lot of push from the side of the state to move in the direction of regionalization, and it may be the case that we become more eligible for grant funding, but from the state legislature if we were to move in that direction. I don't know that that's the case, but it's a probability that that would be more attractive from those representatives of the state if we were to move in that direction, and we should at least look at how that makes us more eligible for grant funding if we were to open that door back up again.
I'm happy to ask that question. We have, as I mentioned earlier, we're looking to schedule a meeting with our representatives from Eagle later this week or the early part of next. I can certainly ask that question. I'm not personally aware of any grants that are specifically designed towards regionalization, but happy to do the research and ask the questions.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Additional question? Oh, please, Councilmember Dillon.
Just quickly, as we talk about regionalization, we have to sort of talk out of, there's talk out of both sides of your mouth. because, you know, the state keeps continuing to allow package plants. So if they were truly in a regionalization mode, they would stop
I
with
agree.
package plants. Because that is going to, you know, we are going to have big problems in 20 years when our two neighboring package plants are going to need to be rehabilitated.
I could not agree more, which is why I'm wondering where Baker Tilly's coming up with this notion that the state wants us to move in that direction, because it is a dichotomy. I don't see, what do they actually want? I mean, why would they keep authorizing the package plants if that's what they want us to do?
Well, it's an issue of it's an issue of they talk a good game, but they have no game plan. You know, it's all empty rhetoric. Oh, they don't want to approve these. It would be better if they didn't, but at the end of the day, they always end up approving them.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's disingenuous to say the least, but we don't need to go down that bunny trail this evening. Mr. Gearbo, please.
You know, and this is kind of going back on the non-city properties. We have to pay for storm sewer and support of that, which does support our water system and the treatment and so forth. I'd like to see if we can investigate, is there a potential to create a different charge in terms of being able, because taxpayers are paying for those storm sewers and so forth, if we can assess some other charge. I mean, we may be the first one to do this, but there should be some way, because we should not be providing services and paying for some other aspects that aren't necessarily built into the wastewater system, because stormwater isn't. We just spent $1 million to handle that, and that's helping on our plant. So it's kind of, we're subsidizing one way or the other, and I'd want to make sure that there's a cost to having one of our functions and services. You're better off to be in our city, or we're going to charge you for it.
I will make sure all of these questions related to triple rates are addressed in a legal opinion.
And you think we can get that in advance of our next meeting?
Yeah.
Very good. Is there anything else for city staff or any comments that council members would like to make at this time? There appear to be none. City staff, City Manager O'Toole, anything else you'd like to add?
No, just a reminder, we do need to make a decision on this relatively soon, so I understand that information may be still incomplete in terms of the broader scope that you would like to see, but staff has been working on this diligently, and we are anticipating that we can move forward with some increase this year to help make sure that we are meeting our expectations under the administrative consent order.
Very good. Thank you. One follow-up. Ms. Bennett, between you and your staff, can we make sure between now and our first meeting in May that we've notified our larger utility customers, i.e. American Soy and some other folks in our industrial park, that council is likely to vote on an increase at our next meeting, and that they're welcome to attend or correspond with council or staff in advance of that meeting? Absolutely. Very good. Thank you. Anything else this evening? Then the chair would be delighted to entertain a motion to adjourn this work meeting at 6:49 p.m.
So moved.
Moved by Dylan. Is there a second?
Second?
Seconded by Kraus. All those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Thank you all. I'd like to call this Saline City Council meeting to order. If you please rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, members present this evening in council chambers are myself, Mayor Marl, Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh, council members Dillon, Delorco, and Kraus. Participating remotely, we have Mr. Seo and Mr. Kamara-Sulak. From city staff, we have City Manager O'Toole, Clerk Royal, Assistant City Manager Getzman, Assistant City Treasurer Weberly will not be here. I don't believe DPW Director Searles will be here either, and we do have Wastewater Treatment, Water Treatment Superintendent Briggs. The rest of you who are in the audience this evening, we encourage you to sign up in the back to my left. You can also find hearing devices and copies of the agenda on the back table. At this time, the chair would be delighted to entertain a motion to approve the agenda as submitted unless there are amendments.
Move as submitted.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh to approve as submitted. Is there a second?
Second?
Seconded by Councilmember Delorco. Hearing nothing further, all those in favor of approving the agenda as submitted signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. Again, because they're not in council chambers this evening, I will need a motion to excuse the absences of our colleagues Seo and Kamara-Sulak. Moved by Gearbaugh, is there a second? Second. Seconded by Dillon. All those in favor of excusing, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on now to citizen comments on agenda items. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time, make comment or question on an item that appears on this agenda. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested, but not required, to state his or her name and address for the record. I would begin with, let me begin with our two council colleagues who are participating remotely. Mr. Seo, you're up on the screen now. Is there anything that you would like to say before we start the meeting?
I just have one question, Your Honor.
Please.
Under item number 2297, the sewer relief request, I understand that there's sump pump was running, but I don't understand how the water got into the sump pump. What was the source of the water? Was there some leak that was running water into the sump?
Very good, Mr. Seo. We'll make sure that question is addressed when we get to new business item 22-97. Councilmember Kamara-Sulak, is there any question? Would you care to make a comment or ask a question at this time?
Well, I actually had the same question as Mr. Seo did. So that's the only thing that I would have noted. So I'm good for now.
Easy enough. Thank you, Mr. Kamara-Sulak. Is there any member of the audience who would like to make a comment or raise a question this evening? The record will reflect there are none. Clerk Royal, did we receive any comments in advance of tonight's meeting in which the individual wanted their comments read at this time?
We did receive one comment.
Please.
However, it was regarding the closure of South Ann Arbor Street, so we are going to hold off until that one is actually on the agenda.
Very good, and thank you for bringing that to my attention. That was an item that was discussed at our last meeting, and at the request of Saline Main Street, it has been pulled from council agenda tonight. That's the closure of South Ann Arbor Street. I would suspect that will return for discussion and consideration at one of our May meetings. Thank you very much. We proceed now to the consent agenda. The following consent agenda will normally be adopted without discussion. However, at the request of any citizen or council member, any item may be removed from the consent agenda for council discussion. Well, I'll move to approve the consent agenda as submitted. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Kraus. Hearing no discussion, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda as submitted signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. We move on, let me make sure I got the right agenda here, to new business item 22-94. This is Lot 20A Purchase Agreement, Loom. This will be a motion to approve or not to approve the real estate purchase agreement from Visso Clara LLC for Lot 20A in the Sauk Trail Business Park in the amount of $1 million, and authorize, not authorize the mayor to sign.
Move to acknowledge receipt.
Okay, we can do that. Moved by Gearbaugh to acknowledge receipt. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Dillon. City Manager O'Toole, would you like to begin?
Certainly. The basis of the purchase and development agreement is substantially similar to our standard purchase agreement templates. It does include some additional stipulations that were identified by the the real estate committee during negotiations, the most notable being how we would handle the development of the surplus property as identified in the exhibit section of that document. It does afford the city the right to buy back that property within 5 years if it is not developed according to the plan shared. But certainly the purchasers have expressed a strong interest in seeing that parcel developed fully. If there are any questions about that, myself, Member CO, Member Gearbaugh, and Member Kraus are all members of that committee.
Very good. Before we entertain comments from the petitioner or from our listing agent, Mr. Caparisi, let me first defer to the negotiating team. Let me begin to my left. Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh, anything that you would like to add to the city manager's remarks?
No, there's just one question I had on this, and that can be different, but we negotiated this based on, the idea that this is more than what we had advertised it for. We believe that, this is something that we've approved and allowed in the city. And the other piece of it is the concern that by adding that 5-year buyback consideration, if they don't develop the back half of the parcel, which I hope would be one of their priorities, we'll have the opportunity to be the first one to refuse the offer, correctly. I remember that's how we worded it. And then the other piece of it is just that there's some easements and things on there that will allow for the property to be properly developed should it actually move ahead and go into whatever use in the back. Again, it's a special use permit, so everything's going to have to run through the proper channels and the planning commission before it can be actually built.
Very good. Thank you for that synopsis. Councilmember Kraus, anything you would like to add?
I don't have anything special to add, but I very impressed with Loom when we went to visit their operation. Excited to see what they can bring to the city as far as some jobs, and definitely want a priority, like as Mr. Gearbaugh said, to do something with the back lot. I'm hoping that our minds are on the same wavelength on that. That's very important to the city. So that's all I have to add.
Very good. Would our guests from Loom care to make a comment this evening? We appreciate your attendance here. Please. Yes, and just make sure that green light is illuminated at the base.
It is. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Rebecca Spindler. I'm the district manager for the East for Loom. Very excited to be here and speaking with you all. Thank you for making the time for us today. Just to give you guys a little bit of information about Loom, we just opened our 33rd store. We are pure Michigan, Michigan grown, Michigan jobs. Everything is Michigan. We provide jobs, great jobs. We just crossed the 1,000 employee mark at the beginning of the year. One of the things that we take a lot of pride in is being deeply involved in our communities. Every month our stores participate in some sort of community engagement, whether it's sponsoring a highway or participating in a community cleanup, volunteering at animal shelters, whatever our communities need. That's deeply, deeply important to us. But we just want to thank you for making the time. I don't know if you guys have any questions about what we do or how we do it. Anything that I can answer for you all.
Why don't you hang tight, because I think there might be some questions, and I think they might be best addressed by you or your colleagues. I do want to provide an opportunity. Mr. Caparisi, is there anything you'd like to add at this juncture? No, I'm good. Okay, excellent. Well, we will open it up for questions then. For city staff, any member of the negotiating committee, our guests from Loom, or our listing agent, Mr. Caparisi. Mr. DeLorco, please.
Yeah, I just want to start by saying I too had the opportunity to visit the Loom facility, and I was very impressed with the efficiency and organization of the operation, and everything was very well thought out. And the really nice thing about their operation is they provide full-time employment to their employees. These are not part-time jobs that pay minimum wage. They're actual living wage jobs with full-time our living wages and benefits, medical benefits. This is better than a lot of chains that would come into our community would provide. One question I have is, when we looked at this last, a number of us wanted to see there be some provisions for the development of the surplus lot. And I do see that's included in the agreement. But what seems to be a departure from what we normally would see is that there's no dollar figure or price buyback amount provided in the document. And I'm wondering why that's the case.
There is a price purchase back amount. It's $100. So
Which page
section.
you on?
I'm on the agreement, paragraph 4.
Section 11, item D.
Section, are you in the? Section 11, item D.
Development of the property after closing.
Okay, all right, I see that now. I was looking in the agreement portion of the document.
Oh, no, it's in the actual substance of the purchase agreement.
Okay. All right, that's my faux pas, so
No,
thank you for the clarification.
Right there, too.
This kind of came about at the 11th hour, so.
All right.
Not a big deal.
Okay.
Good question. Additional questions for staff or our guests? Councilmember Dillon.
Thank you. My apologies because I was not able to deep dive. I did not have this document prior to the meeting. And so I do have a couple of questions. One is that there is, in the due diligence period, it looks to be that there's a total due diligence of 240 days. That seems a bit excessive at this point.
That's similar to other contracts that we've negotiated.
It's been our standard, normally 180 days, and then for each additional 30 days, they're required to pay
Additional, deposit.
dollar amount.
That's pretty standard language for us.
Right, and I
We
thought-
realize that 6 months has been pretty much standard for everything, even in the craziness.
So my other question was, and like I said, it may be addressed in here, but I just want to clarify, we say develop within 5 years. Is developed a defined term within this agreement?
Yes, if you look at the actual development agreement, that is where it spells out what that entails.
Okay,
So there would need to be an actual end user identified.
okay. I appreciate that. And then one thing that's just sort of a stylistic thing for me is that this document does not contain page numbers.
We did that intentionally just to really get under your skin. I'm sure we can make that change.
Yeah, I mean, that was it. I assume that this has been fully vetted through our legal teams and such, and I know that we have unfortunately had some issues with contracts in the past. So hopefully we've been able to use that experience and learn from it moving forward. So with that, I did have one question. I will make sure that I ask in front of the body, in front of the council, is that we had sort of hoped that this property was going to be developed into some sort of a healthcare facility. And that was sort of what we've been holding out hope for. And so I don't know if there's anybody that can speak to that at this point. And just sort of, because I don't want the public to think that we just abandoned that idea.
Councilmember Kraus is the chair, I'm sorry, City Manager O'Toole. As the chair of the Healthcare Task Force, would you care to comment?
Absolutely. So it's a good question. I hoped for that as well, as did the task force, the healthcare task force. I do foresee more healthcare coming to Saline. We're making great progress with several, we've had good meetings with several large healthcare organizations that we're not at liberty to discuss right this minute, but the timing is not going to work for that particular parcel.
I'm sorry to cut you off.
No, I appreciate Councilmember Kraus's comments. I would certainly also ask the developers if there was ever any future interest from a healthcare user, whether they would be amenable to us making that connection for the surplus property.
Absolutely.
Very good.
I
Yeah,
just
please.
have one last question, and it's just, I know this is a depiction of the retail establishment on the property. It looks like a very small building on a very large parcel that has a lot of parking. Obviously, it's going to go through planning, but it looks a little odd that it's a very small building on a large piece of the parcel. And so I
Please.
just wanted to know if that was something that you intended to expand upon.
Yeah, we haven't, sorry, John Abbo on behalf of Loom, I'm the in-house attorney for Loom. We haven't really fully delved into the plans. That's just a depiction of what we're thinking. That's typically our standard size for a retail establishment, I think, is around like 24 to 2,500 square feet. and the optimal parking spaces are probably about 25 to 30 parking spaces. So that's what we would probably shoot for. I think there was a lot of parking shown, but that was the surplus property, if I'm not mistaken, in that exhibit, which would be, which, you know, we don't have a use for that property yet, but I don't, you know, as far as the parking is concerned, I don't think that would be applicable to the development as far as the surplus property is concerned.
Thank you very much. And then one last question, it's probably for the city manager. Will Loom be responsible for the connection road between the two plazas?
The development agreement does stipulate that if the surplus property, when the surplus property is developed, there be a connection, and that's something that they agreed to early on in the process.
Okay. And then sidewalks and such like that is addressed?
That would all be addressed as part of the site plan approvals.
Okay. Because I know that was something that we've talked about of having the sidewalks put in initially instead of, you know, a back-end project, so that at least the city is sort of whole in that aspect. And then the other piece is, will there be access to this property, in and out access on Michigan Avenue?
Well, again, that would be a planning commission discussion, but as shown, yes, there would be an entrance from Michigan Avenue.
Okay. I mean, I think at some point we're going to have to look at either putting a traffic light or something, because we're going to end up with several curb cuts there. And that area is already a bit congested. And it's my understanding right now that the hotel and Ace and Zippy's are sort of sharing one driveway. And so I would, you know, in a perfect world, I'd like to sort of see that happening, or, you know, a pork chop or some sort of mechanism to control the traffic into this, just because they're just really, I mean, we see this on the west side of Michigan Avenue right now, where there's a curb cut every 20 feet, and it just really interrupts the flow of traffic.
Sure, yeah, and I think that's why we wanted to make it a condition of this purchase, that any future development of that surplus property require those connections for precisely that reason. But I can say this is, I believe, the last vacant parcel on that stretch of East Michigan Avenue, so in theory would be our last curb cut.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any additional questions? The record will reflect there are none. Then we'll proceed to vote on the motion simply to acknowledge receipt. It's been moved by Gearboss, seconded by Dillon. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. Is there a motion now to approve or not to approve, and to authorize, not authorize?
So moved.
To approve and authorize?
Approve and
Okay.
authorize.
Been moved by Kraus to approve and authorize. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Delorco. Any additional discussion or comments? Well, let me just say on behalf of council, or on behalf of the entire council, we appreciate the work of council members Gearbaugh, Kraus, CO, along with legal counsel, Mr. Caparisi, and city manager O'Toole, negotiating this sales agreement. I think this is a good fit for this parcel. I've heard nothing but good things about Loom, so we're looking forward to working with you. I'm hopeful that this project can be expedited, and much like my colleagues, I'm very eager to see completion of the additional structure in the rear of the property, because I think having both completed is beneficial to the community, not just for the tax revenue, but for the jobs and amenities that it will provide for our residents. So we wish you luck and look forward to working with you at the Planning Commission level. Thank you again for your attendance this evening. Anything else? Then we have a motion on the floor moved by Kraus, seconded by Delorco, to approve and to authorize. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. Thank you all. We move on to new business item 22-97, partial sewer relief for 685 Maple Oaks Court. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt. Let's start with just a motion to acknowledge receipt of the April 12, 2022 memo from Assistant Treasurer Weberling. Moved by Gearboss. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Dillon. Ms. Bennett, you can make a brief comment?
No, sir, I'm just here to answer some questions, and I do have, I think I have an answer for Mr. CO, so however
Please.
you want to proceed.
Yep, if you want to address his question.
So, in the little time I had here, I did do some research and found out that what the sump pump, the water backup sump pump is in the event that electricity goes out, your sump pump will still fill. So it's ran by water.
And because of the fact that the float, similar to how our toilets, was faulty on this, it was demanding and calling for water and pumping excessively. That's the best of my understanding in that quick phone call that I just made to the Department of Public Works.
Yep, actually, Director Turtles is here. So Larry, if you care to elaborate on this issue at all?
He wasn't here when I asked him. But I was looking for you.
The water assist backup sump pump, has a solenoid that tells it when to shut off and a solenoid to tell it when to turn on. And they're not always, reliable. When they do kick on in your house, you totally get used to the noise. So you don't think anything of it. You have a power, even for a quick second of a power loss, it can come on. And then in this case, it did not shut off. Our customer service went out, took a look at the issue when we got a high read. And sure enough, that's what was going on. I did see in the pictures, and something I did want to ask, I'm not 100% sure, and I didn't do the research, is if this was permitted and inspected through our plumbing department. I'd like to know that before we give a relief, that was done, because these do have potential for serious cross-connection issues.
Yes, very good.
You just won massive brownie points with Dean Gearbaugh, because that was his question as well.
Oh,
So you can confirm that then by our next meeting?
yes, sir.
Okay, very good. That appropriately addresses a number of concerns. Are there additional questions from the dais?
I don't know if we're good or not, Larry, you're good.
Ms. Dillon?
Thank you. I had a couple of questions. I kind of ran them through staff and the city manager earlier. I just wanted to make sure. One of the things that I would like us to do and have a sort of policy in place is going forward, whenever we do get these, making sure that these are owner-occupied residences, and that they are not a landlord-tenant situation where it's a neglected property and such that we are having to check on. And so I do know that that's the case here, and I'm not implying that it was in this situation, but I think that should just be part of our checklist. And then my other question was, have we ever estimated what our investigation fee is? We're sending staff out to these properties. We've got internal staff doing research and such for it. I guess I'm just trying to figure out if we need to, at some point, start passing some of that expense onto this process, and just sort of seeing about that.
We do have fees in the fee book for certain levels of customer service appointments, and I'll be totally honest, I don't know if we have one for this. This would have came up as a recheck, and traditionally, I think we do the rechecks on a courtesy basis.
Right.
Am I right? Yeah. And so, yeah, going forward, this would be something to consider if we're looking at any kind of adjustment on the bill.
Right.
I agree.
I didn't know how much of your staff time is used. That's what I'm trying to, if it's a nominal amount of time, I appreciate that we provide customer service to our residents. I just want to make sure that it's not taking staff away from other things. And if there is time involved, that, it should have to be a pass-through.
This was a nominal use of our time.
Okay.
It did not take us long to see what was going on.
Okay, I appreciate that. And then the other thing that I had a question about was that in the pictures and in the memo, it talks about where the drainage point is of this. It sort of appears close to a property line, but it's hard to tell in here. I just want to make sure we're not running into an issue of water transgressing onto another property.
Right.
And if that pipe is in the right place. Like I said, it's hard to gauge by these pictures, the angle of them.
I think some of that information could come out if we had a permit in the records. I'll look at all the permit issues, whether they had one or not.
I believe Ms. O'Toole's already forwarded it to you.
Yes, I've already forwarded this on to our code enforcement service just to double check, so we'll follow up. If council doesn't feel they have the information to take action tonight, we can follow up with that information at a subsequent meeting.
I would recommend that we just move to acknowledge receipt and that this appear as unfinished business at our next meeting in May. Okay. Very good. Thank you. Anything else? No? Oh, Mickey, you have something else? No? Okay. All right. We have a motion then on the floor moved by Gearboss, seconded by Dillon to acknowledge receipt. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. And then without objection, this will reappear as an action item under unfinished business at our next regular meeting scheduled for May 2nd, 2022. We move on to new business item 22-98. This is new trash pump for the wastewater treatment plant. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the April 11th, 2022 memo from wastewater treatment Superintendent Briggs and to approve or not to approve a quote from CAT in the amount of $45,743.75 to purchase the new 6J SCEE-DIST-4L E2T-M pump. How'd I do with that?
Well.
That was moved by Gearba to acknowledge and to approve, sir?
Yes.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Kraus. Mr. Kraus.
Hi.
I said earlier I was foggy tonight. Mr. Briggs, the floor is yours.
Okay, so this is a trash pump that has been on the books to buy for a couple of years, and nobody's ever pulled the trigger on it. After I discovered that we had the money available, I dug into what the original quote was, and it was kind of a bells and whistles, full boat trash pump, which I don't really feel we need at this time. So then I got a couple of prices, one from Mercino and one from CAT. They're both, good suppliers and aren't going to shine us on or anything about anything. So you can see there's a fair difference in price. I think there was a question about the hoses. And I did a little research this afternoon. Excuse me. I think I miscounted on what I had quoted before, but I actually looked up the prices again. So the difference, kind of the difference in the price for Mercino's being a little high is the hoses that they don't really quote the prices on. But compared to the hoses that I would have bought or will buy if we get the other trash pump, it's about $6,562 for the hoses that they're supplying.
Superintendent Briggs, for the average citizen or business owner who's watching at home, can you explain just briefly the purpose of this technology and why it's vital it be replaced?
Certainly. We have occasion to use at the wastewater plant a pump like this, and we've in the past rented one at not a nominal cost at all. It's been fairly expensive. I've been told the number of times we've rented a pump over the last few years, we probably could have paid for this one already. So I want to kind of nip that in the bud and make sure that we have what we need when we need it, have enough hoses to do what we need to do at the wastewater plant. We have to pump a tank empty. We need something like this to be able to do that. And on top of that, it could come in handy for Mr. Searles out in his system, maybe to do a bypass once in a while.
Good, very good, excellent. Thank you for that. Questions for our wastewater treatment superintendent? Ms. Dillon?
Thank you. Well, you just answered my question because I was like, I see wheels. Does that mean it's portable?
Yes, it is.
So, woohoo, can use it for more than one. So then I just wanted to double check. So your economic impact is the actual cost. Do we need to add it in the factor of the hoses to that for the approval tonight?
That's up to you. I mean, the proposal is just to buy the pump. It's got a fair lead time to it. And the hoses really, the dollar amount that I quoted for what Mercino had, we actually have some of that hose already. So we wouldn't necessarily have to spend quite that much money. We're probably looking at about $5,000 or $5,500 to buy the number of hoses we'd need. But, if you want to run that in on the whole thing, I don't know how that puts a monkey wrench in the process.
There'll be separate expenditures, so the total hoses will be less than our administrative approval.
Yeah.
This will just be for the pump itself.
That was my next question, was it just falls under your administrative amount.
Yes.
So it would be fine to do that.
Yes.
That's fantastic. And then my last question is, and you just sort of touched upon it, which is timing.
Timing, I want to say it was, I'm trying to remember, 6 to 8 weeks for delivery, I think. So we may not even receive it before the end of the fiscal year, but, I mean, depends on, who knows what supply chain's like right now for this kind of thing.
So 6 to 8 weeks is in the scope of things, is not a long time. At
Not
this
lately,
point.
especially, no.
But I know that, because we use this pump, and it's probably before your time, right at the entrance. Ian, do you recall that?
Oh, to
That
bypass?
we had to use that pump.
There was,
Right.
I believe they had to bypass at the point in time where they expanded the wet well at the wastewater treatment plant. They had to bypass around that whole system to be able to pour the concrete and everything, because it was right in the sewer, basically where the sewer line came in
Right.
to the building. So that might be what you're thinking.
It may have been, I just felt like there was something that dealt with, we had water events, like we had a lot of rain, and they had to pump. And it was right near the front, there was a valve that was stuck open. Any ringing bells for anybody?
No, we
That-
had that incident last year where, unless you recall, Jim, where it was, we had 4 or 5 inches of rain and it flooded the basement of the.
Yeah, the submersible pump in the wet well failed a couple of times during heavy rain surge events, and we had.
It wasn't wired.
Yeah, there was a problem with electrical, and the normal gravity feed fall effluent wasn't working because the level of the river was too high, and that pump kicks on in that situation, and if that pump fails, then they have to wheel in some kind of rented pump or cobble together whatever parts they had to make one work that they had laying around. There was a couple times that happened that ended up being very expensive.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. DeLorco. That's exactly what I'm referring to. So I'm hoping that this will arrive, the point of my story is that I'm hoping this will arrive before we sort of hit that rainy season.
Well, I think we're, luckily this spring kind of passed most of our rainy season. We're gonna have rain, obviously, but I'm hoping no large rains. So, but yeah, I remember what, them talking about the flood pump failing, and so they had to pump around that, so yeah.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Gearba?
So this will work for that purpose?
Yes. Now, I would probably disinfect the hoses before we do that, if we use it for something inside the plant before that, but, just.
Clarifying what purpose it was actually, what other reasons you could use it for. The other question is, will this set outside? Or do we need to have?
I hope it'll be inside. We have a building that has a doorway that's probably too small by about half an inch to get it in right now. But with the wastewater treatment plant upgrade, where we're going to put our bar screen, our fine bar screen, is the same place that our current storage building is. So we're going to have to do something there, and if nothing else, it'll go in that storage building right now, to the point where they decide to dismantle it to put the new bar screen in. But I want to locate somewhere on that property, and I've talked to Brian Rubel about that, about where we can put something so we can park our trucks inside and the lawnmower inside and that kind of thing, so.
Because that was my question, because we knew we bought this, but I've seen other equipment out there that's had to sit outside.
For the very same reason, the doorway's about that much too narrow to be able to get it to go in.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, if there's nothing further, is there any discussion on the motion? Bill, thank you very much.
You're
Appreciate it. If not, we have a motion on the floor, moved by Gearboss, seconded by Kraus, to acknowledge and to approve. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 22-100, major and local street overband crack sealing. This is a pretty standard item. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the April 13th, 2022 memo from DPW Director Searles, and to approve or not to approve Schrodel Construction to perform the 2022 spring crack sealing application on major and local streets. Moved by Gearboss to acknowledge and to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Dillon. Mr. Searles.
Yes, we're asking council to approve entering into a work agreement with Scadeller for overbanding, joint sealing. What's pretty amazing is that this price that they gave us is actually 6% less than the last price at a time when all of these oil-based products are going up and up and up, including asphalt and everything else. So I thought it would be worth the opportunity to get into a work agreement with Scalar and get moving on the joint and crack sealing.
Very good. Excellent. If we can get some of the data in your memo to the city manager, I'd like to address this item because it is upcoming for this construction season at Friday's Infrastructure Town Hall.
Yeah, and I have something pretty good for you. Unfortunately, I don't have what was planned for this year, but Jeff kept good records on where he was, so I know where we're going.
Okay, good. Excellent. Questions for our DPW director? Mr. Gearba?
Can you clarify, will this cover most of our streets?
This amount will get probably a seventh, an eighth of our streets. But this isn't a program that you would apply on the street every year. So it's kind of like a revolving program.
Yeah, I've noticed like on South Ann Arbor Street, which is only 2 or 3 years old, I think we did it one point, but it looks like it needs it again. And I know there's other streets that are just so far gone.
Yeah.
We don't even touch those.
Conversely, like my street, Russell Street, would not be
Or Lewis
effective.
Street or
Yeah.
Paul Street. and some of those.
Right.
Not an effective strategy. Any additional questions? Okay, any subsequent discussion on the motion? Larry, thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's been properly moved by Gearboss, seconded by Dillon, to acknowledge and to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. We'll transition to commission, committee, and task force reports from council members. Mr. Delorco.
Just due to the timing, I don't have anything yet. Environmental meets Wednesday, and then the code review committee will meet the subsequent Wednesday, so I'll have something next meeting.
Very good. Mayor Pro Tem Gearboss, any commission, committee, or task force reports?
Planning Commission met last week and extended the site plan for O3 Sports. This is their last extension. They fell underneath the wire of when we changed the ordinance and so forth, so they will not get another extension after this one. And then we just chatted a little bit about other site plans and the potential for them to be up and not have to be, they can't be renewed, so that was it.
Very good. Councilmember Dillon?
The Historic District met last week, and on Monday, I will give a full debriefing of that. There was quite a few things that happened, just trying to get all the information together.
Very good. Councilmember Kraus?
Just for Healthcare Task Force, we are continuing to work. We have some really good discussions with major healthcare organizations. And so there is a lot in process, but moving on.
Good. Mr. Seo, any commission, committee, or task force reports?
Nothing at this time, Your Honor.
Okay. Councilmember Kamara Sulak, any commission, committee, or task force reports?
Not a report, but I would like to say that at Saline Salutes, it was a real honor to see Blake Coy named the Student of the Year. And of course, that's, you were there, and Miss Dillon as well, and had the opportunity to see all the other accolades given to our very deserving people of our community. And I hope that in the future, maybe all of council can attend, because Citizen of the Year, Lifetime Achievement Award, Visionary Award, Distinguished Veteran Award, First Responder Award, and Youth of the Year, I think are some real positive stories, and be able to celebrate all the great things that happen in our community. And so that's all that I'd like to say.
Very good.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was a very nice event, and we were very honored to recognize some real outstanding Salinians, that's for sure. Just a reminder, too, we do have some vacancies on some public boards and commissions, including environmental and HDC, and I did post some information last week about what will hopefully be a forthcoming task force on affordability with specific emphasis on housing, transit, and human services. If you're interested in that, you may fill out a board and commission application. And much like several other committees, commissions, and task forces, you do not need to be a city resident, but rather live or work anywhere in the school district. Let's transition now to reports or other announcements. Mr. Delorco, do you have any?
I have none.
Mayor Pro Tem Gearboss? Councilmember Dillon?
The only thing I wanted to mention was Mr. Kamara Sulak mentioned about Saline Salutes. The other thing that happened over the weekend was the annual rec center Easter egg hunt. And I mention it just because it was really great to see people out and about again. It's felt like we were kind of returning back into the groove of activities. And it was a great turnout. It was a little bit chilly, but it was a nice day to be outside, and we had some blue sky, unlike today.
Councilmember Kraus, any reports or announcements? No? Mr. Kamara Sulak, any reports or announcements?
None other at this time, thank you.
No? Mr. Seo?
Nothing, Your Honor.
Okay, and the last item is Saline Main Street Agreement. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mayor Pro Tem Gearboss, did you add this as a discussion item?
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to talk about is really understanding and focusing on the aspects of the Main Street Agreement. We haven't really taken it on, in terms of expectations and economic development, and I think that I'd like to see a little more understanding of what our priorities are for this, and especially when we look at our downtown with a number of empty storefronts and a vacant lot that I would love to see developed. I'd like to see a lot more attention paid for that. And then also, there's some other events and things that I'm not sure how we want to handle those, the resources and such that are spent for it. And every year we review it, but I kind of would like to understand a more clear understanding of what we as city expect out of them.
What do you think would be the best format to engage and discuss this issue? Do you think it would be at a special work meeting with staff and members of the Saline Main Street Board?
Yeah, I think if we had the whole board and us, that we would be able to then talk about issues and aspects that we'd like to see going forward.
Okay, very good. Unless there's objection then from the dais, City Manager O'Toole, can I empower you to reach out to Jill Durnan or Holly Andrews and see if maybe we could identify a time, ideally in May, maybe in June, to have a joint meeting of the Saline Main Street Board and Saline City Council? Perhaps we could even join them at one of their monthly meetings. I believe they meet on, is it Tuesdays, Wednesdays? Okay.
They're meeting tomorrow. We all just want to jump over that.
Yeah, I think we owe them the professional courtesy of a bit more of a heads up so that they can prepare.
Kinda knock
Okay,
things off the list.
very good. Maybe you can report back at our next meeting.
Absolutely.
Mr. Gearby, anything else you'd like to add on this issue?
Yeah, the only other, we haven't done it, it's been 2 years since COVID and all this, so things have changed so much that just trying to understand what we want to do and our aspects that, with this new world that we talk about, how we can handle it, so thanks.
Yeah, and just for the record, I did meet for lunch, I think it was the week before last, with Holly Andrews and Lynn Thomas Perry, the Executive Director of the Chamber of Commerce. And the three of us are launching an initiative regarding vacant properties and storefronts in the community, in the corporate limits of the city of Saline. We actually hope to get letters out either later this week or early next week to all landlords and property owners, indicating that we look forward to working with them. We'd like to help them identify resources, potential tenants, with the goal of getting our storefronts occupied. So I will be sharing more on that specific initiative subsequent to the letters going out. And I'll probably share a copy of the letter on social media as well. Is there anything else on this issue? Councilmember Dillon.
Just for clarification, this agreement does expire at the end of this calendar year, correct? Because that's what is said in
Yes,
here.
we had a kind of a 3-year agreement on the price, but we did an annual actual contract agreement. So we in theory agreed to a 3-year budget, but we only gave a 1-year contract.
Okay. Yeah, I think that I'd like to revisit this, and I look forward to that, because the other issue is that I'd like to figure out how the farmer's market sort of works into this, and whether that should fall under the umbrella of Main Street, and they can share resources, or, just looking at different avenues for that, because I do know that the farmer market, according to our budget projections, is going to need an influx of support this year. And we may need to shift some dollars to help make everybody whole.
Councilmember Kraus, you had a comment or question?
I just wanted to ask you, correct me if I'm wrong, did you send a letter to Gunther Building to see about those 147, is it?
Yep. That was actually another topic of conversation that the Chamber Director and Main Street Director and I had, because I encouraged them to reach out either via email, formal letter, or by phone to Gunther Homes as well.
Have we heard, or?
I have not heard anything back, and I believe subsequent to that letter going out, the city manager and I had a conversation, and she also followed up with Gunther Homes, but I suspect you have not heard anything at this juncture.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Well, if there's nothing else under the discussion portion of tonight's agenda, we'll proceed then to public comments, or second public comment period. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time, make comment or question to City Council. This public comment period will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. Are there any citizen comments from those in the audience this evening? Please, Stuart, like to come to the podium? Before Stuart gets started, Clerk Rowe, do you have the timer? Okay, I just wanted to make sure it didn't go missing. Please.
It's good to have a timer with an attorney, because we file briefs and they're not anything but brief. My name is Stuart Collis, 342 Castleberry Drive in Saline. I am a candidate for the 14A District Court position who is just recently opened as Judge Tabby is elected to retire early from his judgeship and not run as an incumbent this year. I wanted to take the opportunity to both introduce myself and get to know you better, as well as to learn more about what's going on in Saline, since I do live here and my family lives here. And I wanted to have that opportunity today to say hello and get to know you better, and I appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Stuart.
Thank you.
Appreciate your attendance. Any additional comments from those in the audience? The record will reflect there are none. Clerk Royal, were there any comments received in advance of tonight's meeting or during tonight's meeting in which the individual wanted their statement read at this time? Very good. Then please note our upcoming meetings, including a special work meeting next Monday at 6 p.m. to discuss the Historic Properties Working Group report and then the Rec Center Sustainability Task Force report. Each report will take approximately an hour. And just to confirm, Mr. Gearbaugh will have the historic properties go first, so they can be here at the top of the hour, and then we'll transition to the Rec Center Task Force report around 7 o'clock. At this time, the chair would entertain a motion regarding 207 Monroe Street, attorney opinion and development proposal for Hall Street. This will be a motion to go into closed session and consider legal opinions of the city attorney dated April the 12th, 2022, and to consider information regarding the purchase of real property. This would be 7:47 p.m. City Council, are we reconvening into regular session at the conclusion? No, I didn't think so. We will not be reconvening into regular session at the conclusion of our closed session. So is there a motion then to convene into closed session at 7:47? Moved by Gearbaugh. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Dillon. The clerk will please call the roll.
Councilmember Delorco?
Yes.
Councilmember Dillon?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh?
Yes.
Councilmember Kraus?
Yes.
Mayor Morrow?
Yes. We are convened into closed session at 7:47 p.m.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, go ahead, Roger.
Yeah, just to note, you do need to reconvene. If I heard you say you weren't going to, you do need to reconvene after the closed session.
Okay.
Yep.
Yep.
Oh, I like that, quick escape.
Okay. Do you want us to redo the motion then?
I think as long as it's clear to the public that you will be
Okay.
reconvening. it's
Council
fine.
will reconvene at the end of closed session. My apologies. Thank you, Roger.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yep.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Oh, no, you have to do a roll call?
Yeah, well, we have to
Go ahead, do a roll
reconvene
call.
first.
Yes.
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 Okay, we're back in session now. Do I have a motion to end this meeting at 9:13?
So moved.
Moved DeLorco. Do I have a second?
Second?
Second Dylan. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you all.